On today's show, I'm breaking down what the Rangers did at catcher this season, Jonah Heim's amazing first half, Mitch Garver's injury-prone season, and a look at a potential free agent that might make a huge, huge payoff for the Rangers next season. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, founder and host for all 4 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Today is Tuesday, October 25th, still several days away from the next baseball game, the last series of the year. If you're not already, you can go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment any single thing below. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. Now, on today's show, we are getting into the catching position, a really weird season for the Rangers, specifically at catching. There was a lot of positive developments, a lot of negative developments towards the back half of the season, and a potential free agent that I really, really didn't think about before, but I think the Rangers, it might make a lot of sense. But let's get into what the Rangers actually did. They came into the season with 2 catchers that were obviously going to be the number 1 and number 2 guys, Mitch Garver, who the Rangers traded for the season, and Jonah Heim, who was going to be the backup, who ended up being the primary starter and had a fantastic breakout season that really absolutely fell off a freaking cliff in the back half. But Mitch Garver was the guy who I was the most excited about. He got a Silver Slugger award in 2019. The question was, can he stay healthy? The answer, an emphatic no. He came into the season with an elbow injury that was going to require surgery. He only caught, I believe, 14 games for the Rangers this year, so not exactly what they were going for yet. 14 games, DH'd for 36 games, and did play first base. No, he didn't play first base at all this season because, why not? The Rangers had plenty of issues there, but he had an elbow that couldn't throw, but he could hit, but he also couldn't really hit. He had a .4 baseball reference WAR season this year. Not exactly what they were hoping for. In 54 games, he had 215 plate appearances, 10 home runs, 7 doubles, and an OPS of 702. Not exactly what the Rangers were expecting, but Jonah Heim absolutely broke out onto the scene with a fantastic first half of the season. Granted, everything kind of went to poo-poo garbage afterwards, but he was taking on an increased workload, the biggest workload he's had in his major league career by far. 127 games for Jonah Heim, exactly 450 plate appearances on the dot. He had 20 doubles, 16 home runs, an OPS of 697, which was 2% worse than the major league average at catcher, a 2.5 baseball reference WAR season, and according to Fangraphs, a 2.8 Fangraphs WAR season. So Fangraphs liked him just a little bit more. That ranks 10th among catchers who have at least, I think, 300 plate appearances was what I set the bar at. So he is just behind, just between the Contreras brothers, right behind Willson of the Cubs, and right ahead of William of Atlanta, and behind Jose Trevino, who the Rangers traded to New York. He had a 3.7 Fangraphs WAR season. So overall, pretty solid stuff from Jonah Heim last year. One of the reasons that the Rangers decided to keep him versus Jose Trevino after they made the trade for Mitch Garver was that he had more power. Well, he still had more power than Jose Trevino this year. Trevino showed a little bit more than we had seen in years past. He had 11 home runs this year to Jonah Heim's 16, which I thought was going to be all the way up to 20 because he had so many in the first half, but the second half was really, really a fall off there. But watching Jonah Heim's plate appearances and at-bats last year, the numbers were honestly pretty terrible. He did have 10 home runs in 82 games, a OPS of 598 though. The walk rate was pretty good. Strikeout rate was not exactly what you would want, but the at-bats were competitive. He wasn't like completely overmatched. You thought, okay, there's something a little better there. There's got to be something a little bit better than a 598 OPS. Like he's a better hitter than that. He just does not look that overmatched at a plate, and the numbers just did not bear out like that. And this year, did a lot better offensively. He was more consistent. He made more contact. He chased a little bit less. He was fantastic as framing like he was last year. He's in the top 4% of all of baseball in framing, in walk rate, in strikeout rate, in whiff rate. He was all, top 40% for all those. Whiff rate, he was in the 69th percentile, which is pretty darn great. His max exit velo was the top 15%, so we know he can hit the ball very, very hard when he does. And his average exit velocity, he was hitting the ball hard a whole lot. It's in the top half of baseball. So this is a guy with a lot of offensive potential. We saw it at the first half. That first half, his numbers were, like I said, so much better. 69 games in the first half, which is pretty darn nice. He had 12 home runs, a 781 OPS, and a OPS versus everybody else was 19% better than the average catcher at that time. He also had 12 doubles and an on base of 313. Everything started to go downhill in that second half, though the workload was quite a bit. He was not expected to be the primary starter, like I said. I think the Rangers were obviously aware of Mitch Garver's health issues. They were not aware that he already had a health issue going into the season when they traded for him, which I would have thought that the medical examination for a player, you always do a medical physical whatever checkup on the players before the trade is officially approved, and apparently that didn't catch the ligament damage in his elbow that would basically keep him from catching almost at all the entire season, because he was dealing with it from the start. Mitch Garver, that is. So Jonah Heim stepped up in a big way. It was, again, it's easy to get down on his season because of how frustrating the end of the season was for him. But I mean, when he was good, he was really darn good. And the same could be said about Mitch Garver. And Mitch Garver, in May, I believe that's when he finally started DHing full time. He only played in 13 games that month, but he had 4 home runs, 6 doubles, an OPS of 1,006. The guy was absolutely on fire. And we saw what Minnesota saw, that when this guy is healthy and on a tear, he is one of the better hitters in all of baseball. I mean, he's not incredibly consistent, and again, the health problems have been a huge issue, and that was one of my main concerns going into the season, going into this trade. As much as I liked it, there were some concerns about keeping Mitch Garver healthy, but we saw in that month of May, and it's easy to forget that Mitch Garver is still here. Rangers still have him for another season, but that guy, when he's right, is a really explosive bat that could help the Rangers offense out quite a bit. Coming up, we're going to get into some of the negatives from the catchers this season, a little bit of a look at who is going to be catching for them next season as well. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every single game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. So if you're feeling frisky on those Mavs who are doing well, you can go bet on Luka Doncic to go score a bunch of points and win a bunch of games. I believe they're playing tonight. If you want to go bet on that, if you want to go bet on the Stars who are coming off a poo-poo loss, I think you can do that as well. Or if you want to bet on the Cowboys because you're feeling frisky, then you can go and do that at BetOnline. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, the Rangers did have some very positive developments this year, but they also had some pretty negative developments. The main negative development, obviously, Mitch Garver being out at the All-Star break, and he was also not entirely healthy before the All-Star break as well. So that was a hugely disappointing outcome as well. But Jonah Heim's second half was another part of the disappointment puzzle. He had a 589 OPS in the second half, just 4 home runs in 58 games, 9 doubles, 1 triple, his only triple of the season. Batting average below 200 at 181, and an on base of 279. That is just not great. That was incredibly evident throughout the month of August and September and July, he still had a really, really great month. That month of April and March, he only played in 10 games, but he had an OPS over 1,000 in April and March. And that was when he was still the backup catcher, had 6 walks with just 3 strikeouts, an on base of 444, slugged 600 for that month. He was absolutely incredible. Then in the month of July, he had an OPS of 816, which was his second highest of the season. Also had 2 home runs that month and it's 7 doubles, just a really, really consistent month for him, and an on base of 368, which was the second best month for him of the season outside of that April and March. But everything really came crashing down in August and September, and it was just so incredibly evident. The Rangers had to go and get Kevin Plawecki for some reason. I don't really know why. They had some other people. They wanted the good clubhouse guy for the end of the season when everything was already lost and they had already fired their skipper and their president of baseball operations. They're just like, yeah, let's just get a vibes guy in here, Kevin Plawecki, who's just gonna exist and not give a bunch of at bats and games to Sam Huff, who, by the way, had a really fantastic season in Round Rock this year. 63 games for him there. He had 21 home runs in 63 games, an on base of 336 and an OPS of 868. That is the Sam Huff that the Rangers want to see. He made some real improvements as a receiver. I saw this year, spent a lot of time at the big league level, didn't play as many games as I would have wanted him to play for being there as long as he was. Only had 44 games at the big league level, just 132 plate appearances, because a lot of those felt like he was coming in late. Only 4 home runs and 4 doubles, which is very unlike him. He is a guy who is literally light tower power, top of the scale raw power, and tapped into it in games a whole lot at the minor league level. Hasn't done so as much at the major league level. He did in his quick stint with the Rangers at the big league level in 2020. He had 3 home runs in 10 games there and 3 doubles as well, but not as much so this year in a larger sample size. I think that I'm a little worried about him. Obviously, he's got those big strikeout numbers, doesn't walk quite as much as you want for a guy with his tremendous level of power. If he can walk a little bit more, then he'll get better pitches and hit more home runs and vice versa. And it's a never-ending cycle that feeds itself. And if it doesn't, then things can get hairy pretty quickly for him. But I'm still a believer that eventually Sam Huff could be a at least average major league starter at catcher. The value drops off quite a bit if he is just playing first base or DHing, which he did a little bit of this year, playing some first base and DH more than we had seen him do so in the past. He had 6 games at first base this year and 4 games at DH and caught 29 games this year. But I still would have liked to see a little bit more of him at catcher as opposed to signing a veteran for no particular reason. Mitch Garver, again, didn't play in the second half, and Jonah Heim fell off a cliff in that second half. So there were definitely some down moments for sure. The Rangers also got some decent contributions from Mabius Valori, which was not something that I expected to say at all. He really did come up and have some really great moments offensively. He basically had that like 1 week where he was just absolutely incredible, and then everything after that was kind of bad. Only had 75 plate appearances in 26 games and a 550 OPS with a pair of home runs, but I don't know, it's fine for like a 5th catcher, which is what he was at that point. Fourth catcher. Still, came up, did fine, had some time at the major league level, did really, really well in AAA. Granted, it didn't quite translate to the big league level for more than a week, but still, it was fine. He had a .3 WAR season in 26 games for a 4th catcher. That's pretty solid, honestly. The defensive prowess was there. He was a good receiver. He had a pretty good arm, and he had that one really great diving play in foul territory in Oakland that was just absolutely magnificent. But I don't expect him to be a big league regular, unlike Mitch Garver and Jonah Heim and Sam Huff. And the question comes next year. The thought is that Mitch Garver is going to be healthy with the surgery that he had at the All-Star break. He is going to be healthy and ready to catch full-time next year. And the question becomes, is he even going to be the primary starter with how well Jonah Heim did down the stretch? I still think emphatically yes, but I think it's going to be more of a 1A, 1B situation than it was going into the season, whereas like Mitch Garver's here and he's going to start as much as he can, and then Jonah Heim is going to spell him when he needs a day off. I think it's going to be more even. I think Mitch Garver is obviously going to have a lot of DH opportunities because the Rangers don't have a full-time DH, or if his body continues to break down, then maybe they just stick him full-time at DH. And even though that's a lot less valuable actually than having a catcher who's an offensive force and having to waste your DH spot on a guy who should be playing a position and doing it all right, then that kind of loses some value. But I think having both of them healthy for the full season can take some of the pressure off of each other and make the Rangers that much more dangerous next year, so that Jonah Heim can be, if he is a backup catcher, then he would be by far the best backup catcher in all of baseball. But coming up, we're going to look at a free agent that if the Rangers wanted to trade one of these guys away or just commit full-time to Mitch Garver DH, or, like I said, trade Jonah Heim away, there's a guy who the Rangers might be willing, might make the Rangers willing to do that. But first, let's word from our sponsors. Now, the Rangers have obviously a lot of options at catcher at the major league level. I think almost certainly they're going to go into the season with Mitch Garver and Jonah Heim as their 1A and 1B, and then Sam Huff, depending on what is going on with him. I think he could definitely push for some time to catch at the big league level, depending on the health and success of both of these guys. Or maybe they could end up shipping Sam Huff off to make a trade for some starting pitching, which the Rangers also very desperately need. So catcher is not really a position of need, but outside of Sam Huff, behind him, there's not a whole lot of depth in the system for catcher. There is nobody on the MLB pipeline top 30 who is a catcher. I don't know that I would have, if I did a top 50. I'm not ranking 50 prospects. I'm not that smart. I'm not that dedicated to be able to go in depth about 50 I'm not Jamie Newberg, and that's okay. But I don't know that there are any catchers that I would rank if I was doing 50 in the top 50. So if the Rangers want to go out and get a frontline guy, which it seems like they wanted to do that by getting Mitch Garver, a little bit more of a buy low. I don't think they really lost anything. Even having him play just like 50 games this season, they really didn't lose a whole lot. They weren't going to have a spot for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa anyway. Maybe he would have played some third base, but then you wouldn't have gotten the time for the youngsters like Ezekiel Duran and Josh Smith and Josh Young at third base. But I think that there is a guy who makes a lot of sense for the Rangers to go if they're going to spend big money on a bat. I mean, unless you're going to throw the entire bag at Aaron Judge, which I don't think the Rangers do, or you're going to throw a buy low contract on some left fielder like Joey Gallo or Jock Peterson, or name some third option at left field. They could do that. I don't know that necessarily they're going to, because again, I think Ezekiel Duran might end up winning that job out of camp, or Bubba Thompson, and I don't know how much of an upgrade any of those guys would be. But if the Rangers want to go spend big on a hitter, that's not Aaron Judge, because there's not a whole lot of other options out there. I think they should seriously think about signing old Willson Contreras, guy who is with the Cubs, who's had a fantastic season, who is going to be a free agent. He is a 3-time All-Star. He won the World Series with the Cubs when he was just a 24-year-old rookie. He was fantastic that season. Just been excellent offensively, defensively. The guy is just so freaking consistent, and I think the Rangers really, really should take a look at going and getting this guy. He is coming off of his age 30 season, so he will be 31 in May of this upcoming season. He is made his debut in 2016, like I said, out of Puerto Cabello in Venezuela. And I think he has been one of the best catchers in baseball for the last more than half decade at this point. He is still in his prime, coming off of an all-star season. His third selection, like I said, an OPS of 815 last year in 113 games. He had 22 home runs, 23 doubles, and on base of 349. Was a guy who was probably the best hitter for the Cubs last year in a lineup that didn't have a whole lot of meat on the bones, but he has been a fairly consistent offensive force. He led the team in OPS last season, even more so than old Seiya Suzuki or where'd we go? somebody else that was doing well. Nobody, because that offense was really, really not great for the Cubs last season. Even better than Ian Happ, who actually did have a half decent season. He didn't lead the team in home runs, but he was second as a catcher, who was also catching more than 100 games. The guy is incredibly consistent, and I think the Rangers should absolutely go and make a move for him. I know WAR doesn't like him that much better than Jonah Heim, and he would be kind of expensive. According to Spotrac, Spotrac, whatever, they have his market value for average annual salary at $16 million. So a contract in the way of, let's say, 3 years, $51 million. I think that's $16 million a year, maybe a little bit more. I think that's 17 a year for 3 years. Or if you want to go exactly 16 on the money and go for 4 years, take him through his age 34 season. If you're feeling that good about it, then that would be 4 years, $64 million. Now that would be a pretty big price to pay. And I wouldn't go and do that unless the Rangers have already, retained Martin Perez's services and gone out and gotten at least 2 capable starting pitchers. But if you have some extra money left over, and Frey Davis talked about the commitment to spending money, then I think this might be the place where the Rangers' money is best spent. Like, I really do. Because outside of, well, obviously Aaron Judge, and if for some reason Nolan Arenado opts out, or the Rangers want to go and get Xander Bogaerts and go ahead and move Corey Seager to third base, which they could do. I don't necessarily think they would. There's not a whole lot of other great offensive options on the market. There is Dansby Swanson, which, again, you'd have to do the exact same thing. I don't think they're doing that. You could go get Josh Bell, which, again, I don't even know that he is an upgrade offensively over Nathaniel Lowe with how poor he was in the second half of the season. Gary Sanchez, no thank you. Just going down this list, there's just not a whole lot of people that make me say, oh yeah, the Rangers need to go get them, because they would be a huge upgrade on the bat. But I do still think the Rangers probably need one more big bat in their lineup. The 1, 2, 3 is, like, I think fine. If Mitch Garver's healthy, then that is your number 4, and that pushes probably Adolis Garcia to your number 5, and then, dealer's choice for the rest of that lineup that I think would be a pretty good lineup. But if the Rangers just want pretty good, then they're probably not going to go for a guy like Willson Contreras. But if they want to go for a great line, if they want to go for, like I said on yesterday's episode, if they're looking at teams to follow their model, the Dave Dombrowski Phillies model of having a couple of elite starting pitchers, which, again, they could go get either via trade or via free agency this year, maybe go get one in each lane, then your number 3 is Martin Perez, and John Gray is your number 4, and that is the makings of a really darn good rotation. If Dane Dunning is in there at your 5, you can be consistently counting on him for, I think, 150 innings a season, because he is a competent starting pitcher at the back end of a rotation. But then you have, well, better defense than everywhere at the Phillies. You have an elite catcher, both offensively and defensively, which the Phillies have in Real Muto, and the Rangers could go get in Willson Contreras. I don't know how many teams are going to be out there bidding, focused on him as their main offensive piece, but I think if the Rangers go and hit him early with a big offer, I don't think the Cubs are going to retain his services, because the Cubs are crying poor and don't want to spend money. They literally just traded away Yu Darvish after a top 2, should have been top 1 Cy Young finish with like 3 years left on his contract, because they're like, we can't really be bothered. They traded away, or they let Anthony Rizzo go. They let Chris Bryant go. I think they traded both of those guys away, if I remember correctly. But anyway, this has not been a team that is willing to spend money to retain its free agents, especially the ones who won them a freaking championship, which boggles my freaking mind. So the Rangers should just go for it. They should just freaking go for it, because the teams that are contending right now, they pretty much have their catchers. They're not going to spend a whole lot more money on those guys. I mean, the Padres, they have several that are fine. I don't see them going and spending money there. They would more likely be trying to spend money in other places. The Dodgers have Will Smith, who is fantastic. The Astros don't care to spend a whole lot of money. The Phillies obviously have theirs. The Yankees, well, they've been kind of weird about spending money, and they're going to have a lot bigger priorities in keeping Aaron Judge before they can go out and spend money on a luxury item like a top of the line catcher. So I think the Rangers should go out there and be aggressive and go and get Willson Contreras. I would absolutely love to see that. It does not take away for my appreciation for Jonah Heim and Mitch Garver, but I have obviously a lot of well-earned concerns about Mitch Garver's health. Willson Contreras, one of the great things you can say about him is that he has been incredibly durable. He has caught over 100 games every season that there's been a full season since 2017. And in 2020, when it was the shortened season, he caught 57 games. Or excuse me, he played in 57 games. He might have DH'd a little bit more than that. But he has also played some other positions really randomly. He's played a little bit of the outfield, 39 games there. In his 5 seasons, he's DH'd only 58 games in his career. And he's played third base twice, first base 11 times. So again, that's almost entirely catcher. 626 games at catcher in 7 seasons. That is incredibly durable and consistent, and something the Rangers could most desperately use. And a very, very consistent hitter from at bat to at bat, the Rangers could plug in as their cleanup hitter and feel really freaking good about it. And I would absolutely love to see them go and get aggressive and get a 3-time All-Star and take this lineup from pretty good to absolutely freaking fantastic. And that is exactly what being aggressive and going and getting a guy like Willson Contreras. I don't think it should come at the expense of getting starting pitching. Absolutely not. That has got to be priorities number 1, 2, and 3 this offseason. But maybe priority number 4, go get this good guy of Willson Contreras, because people, I think, will be sleeping on him. And if the Rangers offer him a pretty fair contract for, 3-4 years, then I think this would be a huge, huge win for the Rangers, and something that could really, if they're super duper serious like they say they are about contending literally next year and making the playoffs for surezies next year, this is the kind of move that would send them over the top and make them very, very dangerous contenders. Plus, upgrading the defense of a team that could definitely use a defensive upgrade. And even though Jonah Heim is fantastic, I think Willson Contreras is just a bit better with the arm and not being taken advantage of on the base pass. He has been 4% better than league average on catching runners while they are attempting to steal in his 7 seasons at the big league level. He also averages 4 pickoffs per season, which is fantastic out of a catcher. I love guys who will backpick runners and get them. That is something that Pudge Rodriguez did and was just so much fun. And I think that, well, maybe the Rangers need to get an upgrade defensively at first baseman for me to trust him making those throws to a guy who is going to catch most of them at first base. But still, I think this is definitely something the Rangers should strongly, strongly consider and would make them so much better, even if it's at the expense of my friends' happiness who are Cubs fans. Rangers, go make it happen. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rangers. Thank you all so much again for making it your first listen every single day. Now, for your second listen, go check out Locked On Sports Today. It is a fantastic podcast, the biggest stories for the day, plus instant reactions, big recaps, and the take of the day available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. That'll do it for this show, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.